Alright, in this video we're going to clean up the tail that comes stock on the bike. This one actually isn't as bad as some of the others that I've had on previous bikes that had a lot more fenders and reflectors. Overall, it's not terrible, but I still would like a much neater rear light setup for the license plate. So I purchased the Yoshimura Fender Eliminator kit. I think this was about $120, and hopefully should be pretty easy to get onto the bike, just because the way this one's situated, it looks like it's just going to be a matter of removing this and popping the new one on. Actually, in hindsight, I think I may have to remove the servo motor that I had to mess with for the exhaust install, so I may have wanted to do this at the same time, but anyway, at least now we know how the servo motor comes out, so it should be pretty easy to do the swap. And while we're cleaning up reflectors on the rear fender, I also wanted to clean up the the amber reflector here on the front fender. I don't actually recommend taking these off. Reflectors do serve an important purpose, but I just aesthetically don't like the way that the orange clashes with the rest of the bike, and it looks a lot cleaner without it. So it has a 10mm bolt effectively attached to it that you can just start with a wrench and then spin off. Once you pull it off though, it leaves this hole here, and actually this was serving dual purpose, both being the reflector and also helping secure the fender to the front frame of the bike. It has a silver bolt down here, so I would need a nice one to match, which I don't have. I did find though that when I pulled off the stock exhaust, it had about 5 of these bolts that are identical actually to the silver bolt that was down here, but it's black, and I have enough of them to do both sides. So go ahead and replace the plastic or the steel and plastic fender. The plastic side goes against the fender so that the washer doesn't mar up the finish of the fender. And then I can also replace the silver one with the matching black one, so both look the same. And actually this only has a plastic washer, so I'm going to go ahead and swap out the top one also to only have the plastic washer. So pretty simple and real clean now with the 2 black bolts that match on both sides, and no longer with the amber reflector. So here's the Yoshimura Fender Eliminator kit. Just a quick unboxing. It has the LED for the license plate illumination, Yoshimura frame bracket. This looks like what mounts up and holds the license plate and the rest of the bracket. So let's get these pieces out and onto the bike. First step here is to remove both the seats. To do that, you pop the key into the keyhole behind the seats, take off the main seat, and then finding this little cable here, pulling this and popping the passenger seat off. Yeah, and all 4 bolts are underneath the servo motor, so I'm going to use a 10mm wrench here to pull the servo motor assembly out first. If you move that to the side, you can now see clearly the 4 bolts holding the stock fender assembly to the bike. Using a 5mm Allen wrench. So it looks like you did need to remove those 2 Phillips screws as well. Alright, the instructions say to cut the stock license plate light connector from the stock fender assembly at least 6 inches away from the wire connector. So I think this is where we're going to mate that up with this light for the new assembly. I'll go ahead and pull all of this out first though, so I can get a good 6 inches and hopefully also keep this plastic sheathing stock turn signals out of this. There's a couple of Phillips screws on the left side. Okay, two halves are apart. Now it's easy to access both of the turn signals. It looks like they're being held on by another Phillips head screwdriver with a metal clamp around it. So I'm going to pull each of these off. And just to remember, gray is left side, black is right side. We've got these two different colored tabs here at the side. So first step in the instructions is installing the light to the license plate bracket. So you slot the wire through the center hole, and then there's two holes here for, let's see, part 10 on the screws that I imagine are contained in this package. So these bolts use a 2.5 millimeter Allen key. I like to put a little bit of Loctite on things like this too, since it's metal on metal and bikes vibrate a bit. Okay, using the solder shrink connectors provided in the kit, connect the Yoshimura license plate wires to the stock license plates as follows: red to green, black to black/yellow. And I don't actually see any colors on this. Red to green, black to black/yellow. The turn signals both have green and black and yellow wires, but this does not. Alright, so I'm going to get these two sides soldered up. Actually, let me go ahead and just test it first by turning on the bike, and as long as it works, then I'll go ahead and solder it up. Okay, so I tested it out on the bike. Actually, the way that I originally had it didn't work. I just flipped them around and then it lit up when I turned on the ignition. So go ahead and test this first to make sure that you have it right before you solder on these butt connectors. So these are, and it's actually probably would have been easier for me just to get out the soldering gun and use some heat shrink tubing, but the kit includes these neat little, it's heat shrink tubing with solder built into the middle. So you go ahead and slot it in over one side. Then interweave the two wires so that they're connected. And already, somewhat strong hold. Then you slip over this connector until the solder ring is right over the center of the two pieces of metal, or the two strands of wire. And I think you're supposed to use a heat gun. I found that this works just as well. Just kind of going back and forth, making sure not to hit any one place too long until that little solder ball in the middle starts to break up. It has flux inside, so it melts across the wires, and heating up either side too for that heat shrink tube effect to waterproof it. Alright, so then here's the finished connector with the original factory connector, these butt tube connectors that soldered the wires to the license plate frame illuminator. So the rest of this is just assembling the metal components that make up the bracket the left and right ears, the mount that holds it to the bike, and the license plate frame itself. So at this point, we attach this back to the bike because the rest of the frame, the license plate frame and the license plate itself are part of the structure of this kit. So I'm going to go ahead and install this back up onto the bike using the supplied screws, and then we'll finish up the rest of it. It goes bolt, and then on the other side, washer and lock nut. So next we install the turn signals onto the left and right ears before we install it onto the rest of the kit. It just slips in, get this rubber grommet through, and then you replace the metal brackets that hold it inside. All right, and then you replace both metal plates that lock it in place. So this is the first plate that goes inside. And then this one goes on top and secures in with a screw to keep the grommet from coming out. So we'll tighten that down and do it for both sides. And then both of these mount on to the bracket back here, and the license plate frame with the license plate then should finish it off. We'll run these cables back up through the bike, connect it up, and should be done. All right, so a quick note as I'm putting together final assembly. It turns out that the bolts that come with the kit are the ones that are supposed to be used on the license plate frame, and that you are supposed to use the factory bolts for reattaching the new Fender Eliminator kit to the back of the bike. So two things though. One is the new one is slightly longer, so this actually fits perfect. The one that comes with the kit fits perfectly into the fender and just gets into the nylon of the lock washer. The factory one, while using a regular metal washer that comes supplied in the kit, it doesn't get far enough to get into the actual locking, the nylon part of the washer. So I also like the finish of the one that came off the bike better, and when you look at it on the license plate frame holder, it looks pretty neat the way that it very well centers into the cutout of the frame here. So I also like the finish. It's dull as opposed to this, which is a shiny stainless steel. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the ones that came supplied with the kit on the bike to attach the fender to the bike, and keep these then for the license plate. Plus, since it's a little bit shorter too, then I don't have too much extra screw hanging out of the side. I think it'll just look a little bit. I think it'll just look a little bit cleaner overall. Okay, so back under the seat, I have all the wires routed up, the left, right, and license plate illuminator cables. And all of them are just inside this plastic housing here. So I'm going to pop in the license plate light. And then the other two are just color coordinated, gray and black. Black to black. Gray to gray. Cover them back up and kind of pull the boot over this part and then tuck the rest of the cables around because we need to put the servo motor back in. I also want to keep it tight because I don't want these cables flopping back down. So we'll get the two servo motor bolts back in there and that should be it. Emergency lights work. This is taking me left. This should go right. And I see the illumination for the license plate is on. Brake lights still work. Everything looks good.